If you're spending all day thinking about yourself and being self-centered, it's pretty hollow. And if you can lift the spirits or you make a difference in someone else's life, it's kind of selfish. It sets us on a better path.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Talent Playbook Podcast. My name is Jason Ferrara. I'm the Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Outmatch and your host for the podcast. Our podcast focuses on strategies for transforming your world of work. So during each podcast, we highlight someone who's transformed their organization or industry in a significant way. Today's guest is Ben Wright, the CEO of Velocity Global. So Ben will explain Velocity Global in greater detail during the podcast. Essentially, they work with their clients to set up international operations and employees. But the thing that really drew me to Ben is the growth story of Velocity Global. Ben founded the company in 2014, and today, 4 years later, it's number 4 on the 2018 Inc. 5000 list of the fastest growing companies in America. Number 4 in just 4 years. So my goal was to find out how he did it, how he rose to number 4 in just 4 short years. So during the conversation, you'll hear about Ben's sharp focus on being of service to the community, to his clients and his employees. He'll talk about his advice for people starting their careers. He'll talk about some mentor relationships he's had and how those helped inform the building of Velocity Global and the way he works with his employees. And he'll also talk about his summer sabbatical that he took with his family and how he was able to reconnect with his family and honestly reconnect with the business and have the business really grow in his absence. All very cool stories. So Ben's a thoughtful and reflective person. He's clear and he's concise in his descriptions. He tells a great story about being an entrepreneur and building a company. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Here's Ben Wright, CEO of Velocity Global. Hey, Ben, thanks for joining the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Jason, looking forward to talking as well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I think the first thing we should do, just level set everybody, introduce yourself, and just tell us about your job, your company, and how long you've been at it.
Absolutely. So Ben Wright, I am the CEO and founder of a company called Velocity Global. I've been doing this now for about 4 years. We launched the business in 2014. And my job is, everything from vision to chief sandwich maker and everything in between.
So what's the most recent sandwich?
What's the most recent sandwich? Well, everybody around here complains because I effectively went plant-based a few years ago. And so actually nobody likes the sandwiches I make anymore.
Well, as long as you do, as long as they're nutritious and delicious for you, I think that's what that's what matters. That's what matters.
That's right.
And so, tell me a little bit about Velocity Global. Like, where did the idea for the business come from?
Sure. So this is going back a few years. I'm started my career as an accountant. Went into sales and marketing. Been in professional services for much of my career. International has always been an undercurrent. And at a previous position, I was an employee of a company where we helped our clients go and set up their legal entities, their subsidiaries all around the world, and then all the compliance and support that they needed when they have a legal entity, like the bookkeeping and the tax filing and all of the compliance work. Started having companies coming to me and saying, I get that you can help me set up my company in Brazil, let's say, but honestly, I've got this gal. We want her to do sales for us. We've already identified her. We would like her to start in a few weeks. I don't want to set up a company in Brazil for just this one person. We're dipping a toe in the market. We just want to test it out. And then they said, can you just employ her for me so that I don't have to go set up a company?
Yeah.
And it really got me thinking, interesting, these companies are looking for, this is like early future of work stuff, right?
Yeah, right.
They're looking for, honestly, a creative and new way by which to employ people compliantly around the world. So I looked around and really couldn't find anyone else in the market offering a service like this. So spent a bit of time, spun up, a global network of the ability to be able to employ people across the globe. And that's what got me to actually starting and launching the business. And what we do as a company is, if you're an organization and you want to hire someone in a country, but you don't have a legal entity or a subsidiary by which to employ them, which you typically have to have because you have to have a tax ID and everything that comes along with it.
Mm-hmm.
We have a network of companies in 187 countries, and we serve as the employer for your employees. They look and feel just like your employees, but we're technically the employer.
So how many employees does Velocity Global have today?
So internally today, this very day, and as a matter of fact, I think this is a monumental day. I think employee 100 started today.
Hey, congratulations! That's a big deal.
That's right. I want to make a big deal out of it, but then I realized, employee 99 probably wouldn't feel so excited about that. So I don't think we will. And then we're currently supporting, round numbers, call it 1,000 employees across the globe at this very moment. And those employees are spread across 110 countries.
And you're in Denver. Do you have other offices around the world, or do you manage everything out of Denver?
We do. The HQ is here in Denver, Colorado. The lion's share of our employees are here, but we currently have our own employees in our own offices in a couple locations around the U.S., but outside the U.S., we're in Bogota, London, Amsterdam, Bangalore, Dubai, Singapore, Myanmar, Mexico City. I may even be forgetting a couple.
Oh, those are all the hot buttons, right? Those are the places you read about in the news, right? Where there's growth and where there are employees and offices needed. So good to be in those.
For sure.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about a day in the life of you, Ben. So you've got, obviously you just listed off a whole bunch of places, and you've got 100 employees, and you're managing a bunch of clients. And tell me a little bit about what your day looks like there.
The day, I chuckle because how much the day in the life has changed in 4 years.
Yeah.
We're a self-funded business. So, that means that my wife funded it because she works. And we somehow figured out a way where I couldn't take a salary for 18 months.
Okay.
So for the first 12 months, it was literally just me. And I did every single thing and never got to all of it, but just tried to prioritize the best. Fast forward 4 years, doing about $100 million in revenue, have 100 employees, have a leadership team, have people spread across the globe. The day in the life today is really focusing a lot more on the vision and direction of the company. Spending a lot more time thinking about and working on our top initiatives of an organization, of which, both near term and then, of course, making sure that they tie into that long term. And then making sure that we're doing all the things we can to stay close to our clients. I'm actually, at this very moment, going through an initiative of really getting out and starting to see some who I haven't met, unfortunately, but I'm very excited too. A lot that I have met, spending time with our clients and getting to know, their business issues, what's facing them, how we're addressing that, where we can improve, where we're really excelling, where they'd like to see us go over the next 5 years. So that's a lot of the day in the life.
Yeah. So what do they say to you when you ask them about their experience being a client, where they want to go, what they need? What are some of the things that may not be specifically for, hey, Velocity Global, you can help me solve this one problem, but what are some of the trends they're seeing, some of the trends you're seeing out there?
Great question. Specific feedback for us, and I'm really blessed about this, but no surprise, when you hire an absolutely amazing team, is that our clients really love us. And I know so many companies say that, but I hear that all the time. It's that we're really blessed with a very engaged, very supportive client base that just honestly really enjoys working with us, and vice versa. We really love working with them. And so what's cool about that is it allows you, when you have that trust and that relationship, to start getting into that longer term picture stuff of what they need. And some of the big trends are companies there's this amazing and fundamental shift right now of companies saying so many of the things that we've done all along aren't really going to take us into that next level. And there's just general disruption in a very good way happening out there. And it feels like we see it, and it feels like with a lot of these companies that there's so many new technologies that are coming out at a pace that's just mind-blowing. That which was available 2 years ago is basically out of fashion today. And you think about things like cryptocurrencies and blockchain and how the movement of money across the globe. You think about the use of artificial intelligence and deep machine learning, and how you can make everybody in the organization smarter, reduce latencies in everything that you do. And through all of this, and the world becoming increasingly global, it's how can we move faster than we ever have to go take advantage of opportunities literally anywhere in the world. And the old classic places, where the big centers, the big business centers around the world are absolutely still in play, but companies are trying to figure out, how can I go take advantage of in those tier 2 markets and there's tier 3 markets? And how can I be the first mover? Because the pace in which these countries and these regions are growing is like nothing we've ever seen in the history of mankind.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, right? I see an opportunity over here. I got to be able to pivot quickly and go capitalize on that opportunity.
No question about it. No question about it. And there are still a ton of really successful companies that focus on their local market, their domestic market, and be the very best at that. And that's amazing. And we need those kind of companies. In our world, we're talking to the organizations that are truly looking globally. And I can tell you, regardless of macroeconomic global trends, regardless of things that are happening in terms of regulation and at the national, government centers and this feeling of nationalism and those sorts of things, they're just not really factoring into the conversations for these organizations. They know that the world is going global and it's going global fast, and they've got to take advantage of it.
Yeah. This is a little geeky to talk about, but I'm interested in your experience with GDPR. You're talking about companies that are so interested in clearly using data through cryptocurrency or artificial intelligence, and then you've got data protection laws in the EU specifically. What's your experience with that, and how do you counsel clients who have concerns and issues with data protection?
Love it. Yeah, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, really came into effect recently. It's an EU initiative, and I'm not the foremost expert on it, but given what we do, I know a lot about it.
Yeah, sure.
It came in place recently, and it's to protect the citizens of the EU around their data. And it's not only protecting their data, make sure that it's locked down, but it's also giving them ownership of that data for the first time and allowing them the ability to honestly really own their digital footprint. And I personally think it's not only fascinating, it's important. You need to be able to put this in the hands of the people who, this is my data, this is my tax ID, my social security number, this is my earnings, this is my family information. That's stuff that really needs to be protected. It is a challenge for organizations as all of us really grow and scale to make sure that we're providing adequate protections, adequate access to all of those things. But it's really critically important that everyone is doing this. it is serving as a framework for a lot of different companies. And so you have a lot of different countries.
Mm-hmm.
So you have GDPR, but you're starting to see GDPR-like regulations starting to pop up across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we really see it as a positive. Don't get me wrong; it has come as a large expense.
Mm-hmm.
It has taken quite a bit of our time, but we think it's time well spent and resources well spent, because the better that we can be stewards of our clients and the employees we support around the world, then we're really fulfilling our mission. To be of service to everyone. If we're not locking this information down, and if we're not giving employees the ability to own their own data, then we're not really being of service.
Yeah. Thanks for the insight there. I try to touch on GDPR a little bit when I interview people, when I talk to people, because from January through May of this year, it was just like all encompassing in many of our clients and inside our company. We have a lot of data, and so we want to be careful with that. And we understand that certainly with this law, where the EU goes, so goes probably the rest of the world as you look at those regulations. So thanks for giving us your point of view on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I know that you all at Outmatch have been doing a lot of work around that GDPR, and I applaud you for that.
Well, thanks. It was, it's never necessarily your choice to do those projects. There's always something else that you'd say, oh, I wish you could do this, but it's turned out to be an important part of what we do. So thanks for that. Hey, I want to turn this back around to Velocity Global, because you keep saying some key things. I'm taking notes here, and you've got some key things. So you mentioned you have 100 employees, and you wanted to make a big deal out of that, but you thought the 99th employee might feel put out. You've used the word trust a lot. You've talked about being of service to your employees. So let's talk a little bit about your employees. What do you think makes a great Velocity Global employee?
Well, first off, they all need to be smarter than I am, but that's not really all that high of a bar. So we can check the box pretty regularly on that one.
All right, good. Yep.
To be successful here, to really get in the door of Velocity Global, you have to be passionate about international. Because if you're passionate about what you do, it comes out in your work.
Yeah.
You also have to be passionate about international, because when you do business in 110 countries, or actually capabilities in 187 countries, chances are you're going to have some pretty early phone calls and some pretty late phone calls.
Right.
And if you don't love what you do, that can get to be a drag. We look for people who assimilate information really quickly. Yes, there may be trends around employing people in regions. Latin America has some trends that are fairly common across all of the countries, and yet the regulations can vary so much from crossing one border to the next, that not only do you have to be able to quickly assimilate and pick up the trends of what it means to employ people in that region, but also the real nuances of employing someone in Argentina versus Brazil, which are diametrically different as it relates to an employment perspective. We look for people who have a sense of where they want to go. And because that's really important, because we want to tie those individuals' goals to the overall goals of the company. And so that if we can align those, it's going to make for an unbelievable employee experience, so that they always feel like, all right, the direction I'm headed is aligned with the direction of the business, but also aligned with my own career goal. So that's really big. And then, finally, we talk a lot about being of service around here. We are a professional, technology enabled, but a professional service business. And so if we didn't have our clients, if we didn't have the employees we supported, we wouldn't have anything. And so we talk a lot about how we can best be of service to our clients, to the employees that we support across so many different countries across the globe, but also for one another. And that being of service to one another is a big part of really what we're about. And you hear regularly people walking around the halls here saying, what can I be doing for you?
Yeah.
How can I be of service, right? And whether they may have a brief moment and say, listen, let me help you pick something up and let me help. Or, there's days where you can just read the body language and maybe somebody's not having the best day. It's unbelievable. We have a team that really kind of acts like a family. And that's been a big key to our success.
So where did you learn to manage like that? Or where did you learn to recognize those qualities in people, right? I just feel like, you look at some businesses and you think, okay, well, they have employees and there's a successful company, but they don't walk around thinking about being of service to each other. Why is that important to you? And how did you decide that to bring that as a part of your business?
Well, part of it is just simply because it's more rewarding and it's more fun. If you're spending all day thinking about yourself and being self-centered, it's pretty hollow. And if you can lift the spirits or you make a difference in someone else's life, we've all experienced it. It sets us, it's kind of selfish. It sets us on a better path. And in a team environment, that is absolutely the case. I mean, if you have an individual or a group that is only looking out for their own best interests, and stepping over people along the way, it makes for a very poor experience for all involved. And honestly, it leads to a pretty dysfunctional team. And I have been involved in organizations where people really look out for one another. I think of a boss and manager early on in my career who was a mentor in so many different ways, and very little of it had to do with the actual work itself. He was truly invested in me in being the best professional I could be, from getting the work done, but also real simple things like, listen, when you walk into a meeting, you need to have an agenda and you need to follow it and you need to use clear and precise words. And those are things that enabled me to really excel in my career. And the fact that he took the time out to show me that was invaluable.
So were you out looking for a mentor and this person was available, or did it happen, spontaneously? How did that mentor relationship come to be?
Yeah, it was the scheduling department in the big company where I worked just happened to put us together.
Yeah. And was it a formal mentoring program?
No, and we had formal mentoring programs, but for me, the person, they have formal mentoring programs, but in this particular case, it just so happened to be the individual that I reported directly up to on this project. And as I look back on my career there, my time there, that was the highlight. Were all the lessons that I learned from this particular individual, and the hardest thing for me to do to let go of when I left that job was not being able to work with this particular individual anymore.
Yeah. And when you moved on, did you look to seek out another mentor for a different area of the business or your life, or was your next step into Velocity Global?
No, absolutely. I sought out that mentorship once I had it.
Yeah.
And then I moved on. I instantly craved it. And we all end up in situations in our career where maybe we get incredibly fortunate, incredibly lucky that the individual that we report up to, you have that type of relationship. But there's so many factors that go into it. That relationship could be there for two people, but not be there for, that same person, another person, just simply because of personalities or what have you. And so, unfortunately, from there, with only one exception, I was never really able to replicate that same kind of commitment to helping me grow as a professional. So I sought it elsewhere. And I have certainly one mentor in my life that has been a constant since that time, that we check in all the time. But I've also surrounded myself with a lot of other folks along the way, then some that have kind of come and some that have gone. But that main mentor of mine, the one lesson he always taught me that I'll always carry with me till, to my deathbed, and what I share my children with, is he said, Ben, you stick with the winners. And it's so simple, but he said, you stick with the winners. And it's what gave me, the motivation too, to continue to build out that network of mentors for me too, because man, if I have one winner here who is willing to walk this path of life with me, then imagine what more could be. And so, there's a team.
Yeah, that's really great. So have you begun to try to replicate that at Velocity Global? Do you have a mentor program? Do you help other people find that in their work, or do you let it happen organically?
So we today really let it happen organically. In 2019, it is absolutely one of the things we want to start taking a look at is a more formal mentor program. But what we really focus on today is really showing people how to lead, and so that they really get that mentorship and they get that involvement. And they can be, from your peers, where everyone you sit across from. By the way, we have an open office environment around here. Nobody has an office, myself included. And so you tend to be able to work with and spend time with across the organization, regardless of the level, regardless of what division they're in within the organization. So it is fairly easy to start identifying some of those mentors along the way. But we do work with our leaders, and it starts at the top, and they train theirs and they train theirs, and really working with what does it mean to be of service to the folks that work for you around here at Velocity Global. And so there's a mentorship that is absolutely a part of being a leader here.
And do you have a specific, excuse me, do you have a specific curriculum, or are these kind of a leadership curriculum, or is this stuff you've developed over time? How does that program, showing people how to lead, how does that program work?
So we do have some curriculum. One of the things that we introduced this year, which I'm really thrilled about, and all kudos to our HR team, is we've rolled out some online training and some curriculum for folks that people are kind of starting to use and starting to get involved in. And there's some great trainings in there. I've gone through quite a few of them myself, and I still learn something every time I go through it. We are, for the first time in just a few weeks, actually going to bring everybody globally that works at Velocity Global here back to Denver and headquarters. And we're actually going to spend the better part of 2 days doing management and leadership training for everybody.
Yeah.
So it's it is a huge investment for a company of our size, but yes, you can, and we will be able to show that it is going to be able to impact our business. But really, the primary purpose to do it is if we're going to follow through on our promise that give these people a once in a lifetime professional opportunity here at Velocity Global, that's going to be a part of it. So when they head out, either within our company or perhaps outside the company as their careers progress, they have tools which they may not have had before, and then they can carry it on.
So I want to talk a minute about growth, because the story you're telling of leadership and bringing people and having curriculum, and I mean, obviously this is something you've really thought about and you've been actively doing. So I want to talk a little bit about the growth story of Velocity Global, because it's incredibly compelling, and I want you to tell it a little bit, right? So you start the business in 2014, and today you end up and you're a high growth, fast, driving lots of revenue through the business. Just talk about that story a little bit and tell us kind of the milestones there from a growth perspective, because I think it relates to this service, leadership, employee message that we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, maybe I'll start and just talk about some of the some of the data along that growth, and we can then kind of circle back about more of the story. So for the first year, it was literally just me. I think we managed I always use the royal we when I talk about that first year, because it really was just me. But I think we managed to cobble together about $100,000 worth of revenue. Managed to land 4 clients. Tiny little organization with big dreams. Move on to 2015, and We did 2.5 million worth of revenue. It had about 7 employees, all of us around one conference table in a tiny office. In fact, you had to, whenever a phone call came in, you'd have to say, yeah, hey, this is Ben. Hold on just 1 second. You'd have to stand up and you'd have to walk out of the room so you didn't disturb everybody else. And as a matter of fact, everybody had to push in their chairs so you can get, walk around them just to even get out of the room. Move on to 2016 and, we did, I can't remember, $10-12 million in revenue, somewhere along those lines. Had grown our team to probably 25 people. 2017, it had grown to about 50 million in revenue and had, I don't know what the number is, probably 45, 50 employees at Velocity Global, maybe 55, and really kind of started our own international expansion. Fast forward again to 2018 and, we're trending about 100 million in revenue right now, 100 employees, offices, and I think it's 4 different continents. Recently recognized as number 4 fastest growing company on the Inc. 5000, which we're really proud about.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's been, it's honestly been a story of a clear, now this is me talking, right? So take it with a grain of salt. You may want to have to talk to my team and validate that this is really true, but a clear and crisp message around where we're trying to go, what those goals are, and what it takes for all of us to get there. And then making sure that everybody is not only understands that, but is aligned to it. And one of the things, honestly, Jason, I'm most proud of is, for all intents and purposes, and there may be kind of 1 or 2 exceptions out there, really everybody who's been with us has grown with us. So our senior team is made up of, folks who are, have been here with us along the way. And the next level, same sort of thing. And, we're constantly pushing everybody to try to reach that threshold of incompetence like they talk about, right? And hopefully push them far past that. You can, if you need to, you can always go out there and find people in the open market who maybe help get you to that next level. But my goodness, if we aren't going to continue to try, and we haven't been incredibly successful so far of keeping those people who really help us build this foundation.
Yeah, that's really great. I love the idea of the threshold of incompetence, right? You're that to me means they're just new challenges and new opportunities often, and you're believing in your team to pick those up and carry them forward. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm just not remembering off the top of my head kind of what book or what theory that came from, but there was an intellectual thinker who'd put some pen to paper on, everybody has their threshold of incompetence, and hopefully you've identified when you get there, and that's what causes problems when people hang on too long after they've gone past that threshold of incompetence. And so, we always talk about the opportunities here at Velocity Global are endless as long as you have the interest and the ability. And if you're interested in growing with us, let's go. And if you have the ability, and both of us have to be able to make that determination,
right?
Then let's go. And I challenge my senior team all the time. As I said, you had darn well better tell me when I reach my threshold of incompetence, right? Because the last thing I want to do is, lose the forest from the trees and still think that I'm making a difference here. And everybody says, man, you reached that a year ago.
Right. Right. Thanks for coming in every day. But it was really a year ago when you were so effective. Yeah. So we've kind of laid the groundwork with the team that you have and your work with them to become better leaders and employees. Obviously, the growth is incredible, and you really, congratulations on achieving that. Certainly, with the Inc. 5000 list is a great recognition of that. So, what are the 3 key metrics that you run the business using? You've got lots of moving parts, lots of countries, lots of places, lots of offerings, that kind of stuff. What are the 3 key metrics that you use to run the business?
The 3 key metrics that we really focus on here at Velocity Global is first and foremost client satisfaction or client engagement. And so we We poll them periodically. We do a big one twice a year. And we identify, we keep it short, but we ask a series of questions, overall, how satisfied are you with our service? And so that's a big one. If we aren't absolutely delighting our clients, then we're not doing something right. And so that's a huge one, and that's probably number one. Mm-hmm. As a company that has set out our long-term plan and our long-term growth strategy, we look at revenue, and that's not a rocket science one, right? But okay, if it starts with revenue, and if you have that revenue, then everything kind of waterfalls from there, and we're able to make the investments along the way that we want to be able to make to hit those key metrics and key thresholds along the way. And then 3 is primarily because we are a self-funded business, right? We don't have any pockets to reach into. Yep. I sure look at cash pretty close. Mm-hmm. Right. So, all right, we got revenue going. We got happy clients. Are we doing this in such a way in which, we have positive cash in the business, and yet trying to invest as much as we possibly can back into the business to achieve these really high goals, these long-term goals that we've set for ourselves. And, it's a dance and it's challenging, but those are really sort of the 3. Although I don't know, I would potentially add a 4th, and it's voluntary employee turnover, internal. So that's one that we will look at incredibly closely on. That will happen, and we have had a very small number over time. But that's something that I look at incredibly closely because, if you're self-selecting, if you're choosing that this, may not be the place for you anymore, it's probably because we're not necessarily providing that promise that we're giving to employees. And so we keep a close eye on that one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's an important one, and I think it's. I know I asked for 3, and you gave me 4, but I'll give you that 4th one because I think that fits with the rest of this story, right? About employees and really investing in them and the mentorship and leadership training that you're offering to them. Let's talk a little bit about that voluntary employee turnover. I would think that some employees over time, oh, hey, this place isn't for me, or I've outgrown it and I want to do something else, are 2 kind of different types of voluntary turnover, right? I didn't like the culture is certainly one that someone selects themselves out. Whether that's happened, I don't know. But someone who comes to you with an opportunity and says, "Oh man, I just got an offer I can't refuse." How do you help me understand that situation? Do you put those 2 in the same bucket as far as voluntary turnover goes, or how do you view those 2 situations?
I put them in the same bucket, but I view them differently. Okay, is the answer to the question. Yeah. There are people who are going to reach they're going to reach their thresholds, right? Yeah. And they may be incredibly talented people, but they will kind of reach their thresholds, and maybe it makes sense, right? Maybe I need to go spread my wings elsewhere to go, take advantage of another opportunity where I may be able to scale and grow up with the organization faster. For me personally, I am clearly, this will come as no surprise to anyone listening to this podcast, I am so proud when one of those voluntary turnovers, those voluntary terminations, is because someone is able to take the great work that they've done here and launch their career in a different direction. Mm-hmm. We just played a real part in the professional growth of that individual, right? Probably means, more bread on the table. It means, a really cool title. It really means, going and doing something that they absolutely love. And if we could play some small, and we do play a small part in that, could not possibly be more proud. I mean, heck, if someday every single person who works at Velocity Global leaves and becomes an entrepreneur themselves, my goodness, give me the keys to the city. Yeah. That's, I've done my job.
Yeah. I just always love populating the world with alumni of the, certainly a company that you believe in, certainly one that you've started, I'm sure. Populating the world with alumni of that company has got to be so rewarding. It's got to be so exciting.
It is. And I can tell you that everybody that leaves here, I guarantee this, everybody that leaves here is also going to make a really important impact on this world from the stuff that you can't measure. They care deeply about being of service. They see just how valuable it is. They see what it means, to really actively participate and engage in the growth of the people who work around you, regardless of what level. And so, they're passing that on. And for the record, our voluntary termination, since the dawn of time, 4 years of this business, in aggregate, is 4%. So it's incredibly low.
Yeah.
But I know, those that have, those small few that have left Velocity Global are out there and are making a big impact. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. When we were talking before this call, just getting to know each other and trying to organize schedules so we could have this call, we talked a little bit about the trip that you went on with your family over the summer, and you have already mentioned your wife here in this podcast, and you've talked about family a number of times. So tell us a little bit about your experience this summer and how you went about that with the business.
Yeah, happy to. And by the way, as a precursor, anybody who's listening here, you have to do this. I highly, highly recommend it. Figure out a way, make it happen. Yeah. It will be worth your while. So with that, so my wife works for a large biotech firm. And after 6 years of service, they get a sabbatical. And so after 6 years, she knew this was coming and said, I want to take the whole family to Europe over the summer. And she said, given what you do with international business, you can work from Europe, right? And I said, yes, of course. I can work from Europe for the summer. Anything but the briar patch.
Right.
So our plan this summer of 2018 was to, pick up the family and go and spend about 2 months in Europe. Well, over the winter before this, I was spending a lot of time and reflecting on our values, which are velocity, integrity, professionalism, empowerment, and service. And I was thinking a lot about the empowerment value that we ascribe to here at Velocity Global. And I was also thinking about, all right, am I truly empowering my team, right? Am I letting go? Am I giving them the chances to succeed greatly and stub their toes when they need to stub their toes and, learn through experience as opposed to me just kind of, sitting over and watching them. And I came to the realization one night, it just hit me like a ton of bricks that, no, I need to take this sabbatical too. And I need to give our team, every single person that works here, but in particular, our senior team, the opportunity of which none of them before have actually run a company. Give them a chance to see what it's like to run a company for a summer. And all the good, bad, and ugly that comes along with that. So, yeah, I came in January and I told them, and there were a few wide eyes in the room, but they agreed. And so, my flight was on a Friday morning. On Thursday evening, I took a screenshot of my phone of me taking email off of my phone, and I emailed it to my direct reports, and I said, don't bother responding because I'm not going to get it till August 18th. And I took the messaging systems and everything off, and I literally unplugged for 2 months. There was a contract that had to be signed because we're setting up in Mexico. So I did get a call on my cell phone and say, we need you to walk over to Kinko's in Spain and get this thing mailed. But otherwise was offline, off the grid. And I can tell you on every single level, it was the most impactful thing I could have done. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm laughing because I'm laughing at take the screenshot of the phone. Probably not because it's funny, but because it is anxiety producing to think about, okay, I'm actively choosing to be, incommunicado for 2 months is pretty amazing and it should be commended on that. But so yeah, tell us about what you did then without email. I mean, what does one do when you don't have connection to everyone else that you work with?
Well, I reformed the connections with those that I care the most about. And don't get me wrong, I care so deeply about every single person I work with here. But that my immediate family, right? And it was reconnecting with my wife, and it was, getting to know each other, again, a bit more, when you were together all day, every day. And it is strengthening those bonds with my son, who at the time was 9, and my daughter, who was 7, and being together all day, every day, and having no choice. Everything that we did, we were going to go do as a family.
Right.
And, there was no getting phone calls. There was no checking emails over dinner. And, I read books, and I did not think about the business for about 4 weeks, but towards the end of it, it gave me some really good time to actually kind of think strategically and ponder what's next for us as a company. But it's those bonds that we form with the family, that we're tighter now than we've ever been.
Yeah. It sounds a little bit like active meditation. You just force yourself not to think for a while, and all of a sudden you start thinking of interesting things and ideas and things to talk about with other people. Were you actively, touring, or were you in one spot? How did that trip go?
Yeah, we moved around. We spent about 3 weeks in Italy. The longest stint was about a week and a half in Lake Como. It was absolutely incredible. Complete serendipity. We ended up in the south of France for 4 days, and that so happened to be Bastille Day, followed by the French World Cup victory. So that was pretty well timed.
Yeah.
And then we spent about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks in San Sebastian, Spain. And if anyone listening to this podcast likes eating, you need to go to San Sebastian, Spain. It's one of the best culinary experiences of my life.
Yeah, it's supposed to be amazing. I've read a little bit about it, and it's supposed to be an incredible place. Do you think did distance have anything to do with your ability to disconnect? Let's say you just said, okay, well, we're going to go to, whatever. We're going to go to I don't know, some vacation destination, or you go into the mountains in Colorado, where it's much closer to home but still away. Do you think it would be as effective, or do you have to go far afield?
My gut, well, I do think distance matters. I really do. Mm-hmm. But my gut says is I think if you even just get out of, that 100-mile radius, just get out of that town where you happen to be. In Colorado, we have amazing mountains here, and you can even find places where you don't get cell service, so it's easy to get off the grid.
Yeah,
you can do it there, but I think distance had a big part to do with it.
I work with a woman who started a company in Northern California, and we were talking one day, and somebody just mentioned Yellowstone, and she just lit up and went off talking about Yellowstone, and I said, "Wow, you really love Yellowstone." And she said, well, it was the only place that I couldn't get cell service. And so when I needed to check out, that's where I had to go, because no one could reach me, and I could reach no one else. I thought about the impact of that, is really pretty amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And, I should add, we talked about a lot about the big impact that it had for me and for our family. The growth that our team experienced over the summer was off the charts. Operationally, we were perfect. I mean, everybody just absolutely nailed it. They knew the direction. They're going it. They got to make all the decisions, the big ones, the small ones. There were 2 rules. There were just 2 rules. I live by. You couldn't do 1. You couldn't do 2, which, I'm not going to share with you on here. One of them was you can't sell the company. I can share with you that one. You can't sell the company while I'm gone.
Okay, good.
But about anything else you can do. And, they absolutely nailed it. But the most amazing part about it is, I came back over the summer and sought feedback from everyone. And there were some really cool opportunities to be able to coach coming after the summer, right? Like, all right, if you're stepping into that top role of an organization or the top roles of an organization, there's finesse, right? And there's things that you need to consider when you're in that role. And so there were some really cool opportunities for professional growth. And so, man, if you could have operational excellence, but still have the opportunity to coach a little bit so that everybody, when that time comes, whether it's here at Velocity Global or elsewhere, they're going to be ready.
That's really great. The theme of this podcast in general is all around talent and transformation of businesses, and not just the story you just told. I think is just such a great transformative story for the people in your business and you and your family. Just really a neat and inspirational story. So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Of course.
All right, one more question before we wrap it up. What advice would you give to people who are starting their career?
Advice to people starting their career. It's funny because when I started mine, I didn't really have much of a plan. I ended up in the business school at my college just because when I got there, I realized the major I had chosen wasn't the right fit for me. And it just seemed to be the major that most people had jobs coming out of. So I said, okay, that sounds good to me. And then it somehow led me to an internship, and it somehow led me to San Francisco. And I kind of woke up one day and was like, well, how am I here?
Right.
And so I think there's a bit of a lesson in that, set yourself up, stick with the winners, right? You set yourself up for success. And even if you don't at 21 years old, 22 years old, exactly what I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, if you have a general sense of what you want to accomplish, then at least just get yourself down that relatively right path. Stick with people who are doing good and doing well. Stick with organizations that really kind of make you passionate and that are going places. Again, as I think about mine, I certainly was not the best student, and most of it because I didn't apply myself quite as much as I should have. But I put myself in the path of getting myself to the right school, getting myself into the right program at that university, going and reaching out to some really cool companies and saying, just take a flyer on me. And I don't quite know what I want to be when I grow up, but let's go do this thing together. And then being able to take advantage of opportunities as they come up. I think you do that. If you can align yourself and if you can actually come up with, this is really what I want to be in 20 years, well, that makes it a lot easier because then you can start laying out a path. But if you don't have that, it's okay. And, if I look at my path, as an example, potentially is never in a million years did I think I'd be the, founder CEO of a company that was the fourth fastest growing private company in the US, right? I mean, I pinch myself every day. And yet all those different weird stops along the way got me to this place. And it's not how I would have scripted it. So the only thing that I can attribute it to is, just put yourself in the right position and stick with the winners.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. And I love the phrase, stick with people who are doing good and who are doing well. It's really a neat phrase and it's really meaningful. So thanks for sharing that. And, thanks for sharing everything else with us here, the growth story and your, trip with your family and your thoughts about service and, your values and even the tactics of the business. Really interesting. And, I really appreciate it, Ben. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you for listening to the Talent Playbook podcast with our guest, Ben Wright, founder and CEO of Velocity Global. If you'd like to learn more about Ben, I'd suggest starting at the Velocity Global website, which is velocityglobal.com. You can find him on LinkedIn by searching his name, Ben Wright, and you can find him on Twitter at Ben T. Wright. You can also subscribe and download to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spotify, and the Outmatch website. I'd like to thank Ben for his time, thank Ryan Medine for his willingness to pitch the podcast to Ben, and Danny Rowe for coordinating all our conversations and phone calls ahead of time. Thanks also to Greg Moran for the introduction to Velocity Global, and Charles Summers and Chris Gardner for their technical assistance. Our theme music is composed by Chris Garber. Until next time, this is Jason Ferrara saying thanks for listening.